Good morning. I'm Terri, Kimble, President and CEO of the Chandler Chamber of Commerce. And this morning I have with me Frank Schmuck, who is a candidate running for State Senate for LD18. Welcome.
Thank you, Terri. It's great to be here with you.
Tell me why you're running for State Senate.
Well, I love Arizona. I came here in 1988 to go to pilot training right here in the city of Chandler when it was Williams Air Force Base. And I fell in love with the state and the people who live here at the time. So after having done the first Persian Gulf War, came back here, settled, and made it my home. I just think it's a great place. And I think after 20-some years of working at Southwest Airlines, I've learned a lot about people, business, and success. And I thought, what a great way to bring some of that to the state legislature.
Great. Education here in Chandler is a key economic development tool, and it's very important. How can you impact education at the state legislature?
Well, it is. It's about 35% of our state budget. We rank in the top third of the states in the amount of our budget that we put towards education. The highest is at 43%, and the lowest is about 13% of the different states that do budget. So we do have a big impact. A third of our budget is effectively going to education. Although I believe in local control, I think that the school boards know best, the parents know best for their students and their children. But I also think one of the things we can do is when we look at funding for education, we've been ranked like 48th, 49th in the U.S. But if you also look at who's number one and you do some COLA analysis, you go, it's not just the money that makes them better. What else makes them better? Well, New York's ranked number one. And they have a program called seethroughnewyork.net. I'd like to do the same here in Arizona, seethrougharizona.net, which is a repository, one website, that requires all government agencies to disclose what each individual salaries, wages, is being made, disclosed by position, not by name. So now we get the extra set of eyes from the public to say, are we effectively doing a great job in our education system? And I think when we do that, we're going to see some positive movement in where Arizona is going with its education system. So that's one thing that we can do is I say it's transparency through accountability. But another thing we can do is I think we can find new sources of revenue for education, and we have a plan to do that.
Great. Education here in Chandler we are very, very fortunate to be blessed with so many award-winning schools, from our public schools to our private schools, online schools, charter schools. So we're very, very fortunate here. Other than education, what do you feel is the biggest challenge facing Arizona?
Well, I've said it on the campaign trail. I think it's a symbiotic relationship between the education and our economy. I think that you can't raise one without raising the other. But one of the things that we have, and we've talked about a lot on this campaign trail, is eliminating the Arizona state income tax and replacing it with a much smaller consumption fee that exempts three basic things: clothing, food, and gasoline, which is required by law. When we do that, I think we broaden our base, not economically, but the amount of people that will contribute. We have like 44 million visitors who come to our state a year. Many of them stay for longer than 30 days, so they're not paying that lodging and tourism tax that we thought we were capturing. So one way to do this is steadily and systematically draw down our income tax system. We're replenishing it with a much smaller consumption fee, which we think in the end will generate much more revenue for the state and effectively education in the long run. We have to consider two things. We have to consider education and where we're funding, but also the next economic downturn. We don't want to touch the rainy day fund. We know that it happens, an economic downturn happens about every 10 years. We had the 2001, the 2008, so we're prime in the next 2 to 4 years to see another downturn, and we need to be prepared for that. So there's a couple universities that did some studies, and one of them is George Mason University, that said Arizona's in the bottom half in its preparation to weather an economic downturn. But when you look at that study, you'll find out in the top 10 are 4 of the 7 states without an income tax. And you go to the top 20 and you get 6 of the 7 states without an income tax. Is that a panacea for this? I don't think so. But what I do think is that there's some validity to eliminating our state income tax and starting to grow the economy again, giving people more control of their money, where the average filer would save about $1,650 a year if they decided to eat from the grocery store and not eat out every night. But also what we would see through this is an opportunity for businesses to, small business, which many of them you represent here at the Chamber.
We do.
They would have an opportunity to have more capital, which they could invest in more jobs or consume. Either way, we win because Arizona gets more to the general revenue or we create more jobs. Most people don't know this, but almost 1 out of 2 of our college graduates here at the big three, NAU, ASU, and U of A, don't stay here. They go somewhere else. And I don't know any business owner that would train someone to do something only to have them go work for the competitor. And that's what we're doing when we invest in in-state tuition. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm saying we need to keep those people here, become productive citizens, good citizens. And it's not just by improving the amount of education that we have, it's also taking the burden off business. So it's that symbiotic relationship that we need to culture the legislature as best as we can, but equitably, not give one business a better deal than the next. By eliminating the state income tax, that's an equitable treatment to all business.
Interesting. Prop 123 was a small relief temporarily for schools. What other strategic things need to happen for education?
That's a good question. You know, we have 2 children, 12 and 16, and after Prop 123 had passed, we went to meet the teacher night. And I was so excited because I thought, okay, great, we're going to see some good stuff. But as we went into the large multi-use room, right, there was the principal, and she introduced us to the new director of this and the new director of that. And I was like, wow, that's more administration. We must have really gotten a lot of money. So we went into the classroom, and I expected meet the needs list for the teacher to, you know, they're usually this long, to be a lot less. But it was just as long, if not longer. So it was like, I'm concerned. And then I asked the teacher, I said, I don't mean to be, you know, too inquisitive here, but how did it work out for 123? And she says, well, I got a $9 a month pay raise. And I'm thinking, you know, that's our most important asset, our most important resource is the teacher. That is the frontline employee that deals with the students day in and day out, because the student's the customer, right? So is the family. Mm-hmm. And then beyond that is the shareholder, which is the state and our business community. So I said, we have to focus funding towards the teachers. And when we do that, I think we're going to see a drastic improvement in Arizona's education system. So 123 took a step in the right direction, but again, we have a plan to generate more revenue through what we're doing by basically drawing down the income tax system, taking pressure off business, having more consumption, and more people contributing to our income tax, or to our tax system.
Interesting. Arizona is facing a financial cliff here in the next couple of years. How are you going to address that?
Well, for one, I think we need to protect what's in the rainy day fund. Anyone that saw, probably if it didn't happen to you, it happened to a friend or someone you know or a close relative that lost their job, even had to go out of state to get work. Look, I fly at Southwest Airlines. I can't tell you how many people we've transported back and forth to California and other states whose economy was doing better to do work. And right on down to Texas, a state that doesn't have an income tax. So one of the things I will do is work to look at the budget very succinctly to make sure that we're protecting against both of those. Again, it's a balance between our education system and our economy. And you know, I'd like to say this on the campaign trail. I say, you know, as a legislator, we should be a referee, not a coach. In other words, here's the playing field, ladies and gentlemen. Go play the game.
Transportation is also a key component for economic development. And over the past several years, there have been massive sweeps to the highway user revenue funds. Share with me some of your views on that, because if Arizona's going to continue to grow, transportation is a key component.
Exactly. And so that's probably our biggest fear is as we eliminate the state income tax, we have people coming in droves, and how do we keep up with that? Water, electricity, transportation. But I think that's a nice problem to have because that's jobs. But ultimately, to answer your question, you know, CAFE has been increasing basically the miles per gallon you get on a car. And we're adding more hybrids, right? We're adding also electric vehicles. So we're not capturing the revenue we used to capture to help support transportation in our roads. So what I'd like to do after spending a career in transportation, you know, more than 20 years, is to put a team together of experts and different people with different insight, right on down. Everybody has something to offer. And look at some ingenious ways, if I would say it, to capture revenue for the state when it comes to transportation. We have some ideas, and I'll tell you, one of them is not to put a GPS tracker in your car like California's been looking at. I think that's an invasion of privacy, and I don't think that's a smart way to handle it. But I do have some great ideas that we will be looking forward to sharing with the public as we move forward on how it can be done, and it'll be done very equitably, should I say.
So Out of everything that you stand for, what are some of the key issues you want people to know about for 2017?
Well, I think for me, I've always said I believe in the Founding Fathers' principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When it comes to life, I'm pro-veteran. Because why? As a veteran, and like many of my fellow veterans, we fought for life as we know it. And we would do it all over again. When it comes to liberty, like I said, I believe in, I'm a pro-markets kind of person. Let's eliminate taxes and regulations so we have more growth. We saw that at Southwest Airlines. It works wonderfully. And then lastly, when it comes to the pursuit of happiness, I think it's achieved one of two ways. Look, my mother came to this country, and a few months later I was born. She came from France, and I speak French. But one thing I watched was it took her 10 years to become a U.S. citizen. The system is broken, but at the state legislature, there's not a whole lot that we can do, even though we've tried. So but I believe in legal immigration only. I think it's the right thing to do. We are a nation of laws, and if we don't follow them, we become like the parent or the teacher that says, do as I say, not as I do. But the other thing to achieving the pursuit of happiness that I've learned, and I know many people probably right here in the chamber have learned, is through education. And that's why I founded not one but two different scholarship organizations. The Tempe Dollars for Scholars is the one that'll probably touch most to members of this community. It affects basically the Tempe Union High School District. So we have 7 high schools in there where we literally in 10 years have put more than 200 kids to school that, both technical school and college and what have you, some of them who may never have gone to school. So we give people opportunities. And I think that's the beauty of government, is it gives people an opportunity, but not an entire lifestyle, if you will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Healthcare is another key issue. I know that when we have companies that are looking at coming to Arizona, education, workforce development, infrastructure, and healthcare continue to be key components. Should the state of Arizona weigh in on healthcare? Should they weigh in on these issues or not?
When you say weigh in, I want to make sure I understand what you're asking in that question. In other words, should we be asking questions, or should we be actually forcing people to do things?
Either one.
I'm not a fan of forcing people to do things. I think, the person that has the best control of their family is that family. When government comes in and restricts so many things, just like we do in regulations, we create an environment that doesn't want to inspire people to work. And I think, I always used to say this, do you remember the first dollar you were given or the first dollar you earned? And everybody will tell you they remember the first dollar they earned. Why? Because there's some pride in that. And during the first Gulf War, it was a difficult war in the sense that a lot of things took place. Well, shortly after the war, I had 2 good friends diagnosed with different rare illnesses. One was Lou Gehrig's disease, which became pretty much the illness, if you will, the disease of the first Gulf War. And my friend, Michael Donnelly, couldn't move his legs, couldn't move his hands, arms, couldn't talk. He could just blink his eyes, and lived for 8 years with the disease before he died. He was a fighter pilot. He flew in the first Gulf War. But one thing I saw in Michael during those 8 years was he continued to work. So what I learned from that was that everyone has value and everyone has a purpose. And no matter, the word disability shouldn't exist in our society because no one's disabled. They all have something to offer. And I want to give the people that opportunity to get back to work and to do things, to educate, to move forward with their lives. And I think that's something that's extremely important. When it comes to the healthcare, we need to take care of our people that are ill, but I think also let the market do what it needs to do, and I think we'll have prices that will be more realistic and we'll get the care that people truly do need.
Great. We have 2 very important propositions on the upcoming ballot. Prop 205, which is the marijuana initiative, and Prop 206, which is the minimum wage. Can you share with me your views on that?
Yeah, I think those 2 propositions are bigger than the propositions themselves. The Founding Fathers never intended for anybody but the people of Arizona to have a say in their proposition process. I think we're seeing way too much influence coming from other states, whatever the issue may be, and that's not what the Founding Fathers intended. So when I get to the legislature, one of the things I'll work on is how I can protect the people of Arizona, because that's what the process was designed for, not for some other group to come in and say, do this or do that, or we think you should do this or do that. Let us decide. And so that's, to me, the biggest issue here. But specifically on 205, I'm not as supportive of 205. I think that it's not good for the next generation, the next youth. several things come to mind. One is there's no standardized way to test marijuana like there is with alcohol. That's not fair to the citizen or the law enforcement. The second issue is what government agency so large as a department, I just don't think it needs to be a department, but why is it the board being overseen by the same members that own the dispensaries? Where's the system of checks and balances there? You know, it's a very long proposition, and it's tough for the citizens to have the time to sit down and review this. So we have to trust the experts.
Great point.
We really do. So that's where I come from on the two propositions. Again, on 206, I'm a supporter of the free markets. I think the markets, let them do what they will, and I think if it's done right, we can actually see wages go higher without having to dictate. Again, we're the referee, not the coach. Let the coaches determine. That's the business community on wages. We're just to be there to say, look, here's the rules of the game. Let's play by the rules of the game.
And the Chandler Chamber is opposed to both Prop 205 and 206. So there have been a lot of talks over the past several years about business tax reform. You touched on it a little bit. What's that next step? What's the immediate step that we can take?
In business tax reform, I think it's going to sit secondary to eliminating the state income tax. It's going to be a huge effort to make that happen.
It is.
But it's going to help all businesses. So to me, I'm going to have to put that in front of the business tax reform right now. We've got to take baby steps to restructure our tax system to where we become so less reliant on the income tax. Again, 2008, a major economic downturn, and we had a big budget problem. Look, one thing I've seen in the travel industry, I don't care where you live or work, there's always somebody that wants to come to your place and see your place, right? See your tourist attractions, come to your games, what have you. And so I think we can lessen the vulnerability of our state budget by transitioning away from an income tax structure to more of a consumption fee. And that's the beauty of this whole system. And you know, the work comes out of Arizona State University. Stephen Savinsky at the W.P. Carey School of Business wrote a policy report last year. And I just want people to understand this. Appendix B of that report talks about the school tuition organization tax credits and those things. People are like, well, if you eliminate that, we're going to lose our money. Not so. We're going to work to transition that to the property tax system. So when you write that $400 check that you used to write against your income tax, you'd write it against your property tax. And people go, well, the people that are actually taking the write-off are the same people that have the deduction, so they probably had to have a mortgage. So it's very interesting when you read the report, and these are smarter people than me that have done this research and this work, but it really does make a difference. Years ago, I was in Orange County, California as a captain of an airliner headed towards Austin, Texas. And on walks an entourage of, a bunch of Secret Service. And I said, well, who are you with? And they said, we're with the governor's task force. I said, what are you guys doing here? Oh, the governor's here. He's recruiting business for the state of Texas. This was Rick Perry. And I'm like, why? And he says, because we have a great tax structure and no income tax. As I overflew the state of Arizona, I turned to my first officer and I said, have you ever read the book How Money Walks by Travis Brown? And he says, no, what's it about? And I said, it's about a 15-year study Travis did on income tax returns. And he looked at the addresses 1 year to the next, and not millions, not billions, but trillions of dollars have moved from higher income tax states to lower to no income tax states. And I think Arizona can beat North Carolina, who's on a 10-year plan to eliminate their state income tax. And when we do, it'll be good for people, it'll be good for business, and ultimately it'll be good for Arizona.
Interesting concepts. What makes you stand out from your opponent?
People have said experience, life's experience. You know, I've spent a career in serving others, whether it was in the Air Force as an officer, during the Gulf War, as a pilot, or even as in the civic and charitable world. I believe there's no greater calling than to serve a cause greater than yourself, and this just happens to be another extension of that. Great.
What else should our business viewers know about you that they don't know?
That's a good question, and I don't even know if I have an answer for it. Probably the business owners, what they should know about me is in 2001, I applied to go to Thunderbird, the Global School of International Management, and I was selected. It was a great opportunity to go do that. And while I was there, the Twin Towers were bombed, the Pentagon was bombed, and Shanksville, Maryland was bombed. And as I sat there, I thought long and hard about Twin Towers was business, the Pentagon was the military, and Pennsylvania was where I grew up. And I thought to myself, what has happened to our society, our world? And ever since that time, I've always felt like it was important for me to, it kind of inspired me to get involved more in my community and do more, because I've been blessed. I went to the Air Force Academy. I have an education that came from the taxpayer, and I feel like it's time to give some of that back. So I believe in the business world, what I've learned at Southwest Airlines has just been about people, as I've said before. People is, at Southwest Airlines is spelled with a capital P. So if you ever see me mistakenly in an article spell P with a capital, people with a capital P, you'll know why. And why? Because it's so important. You know, we're not in the airline industry at Southwest, we're in the people business. And I think the legislature should be in the people business. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and Abraham Lincoln said something in 1863 where my fifth generation ago, my great-great-great-grandfather Henry Schmuck fought. He said, government of the lobbyist, by the political action committee, and for the special interest. No, he didn't. He said government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that's how he ended his speech. And so I think if we get back to people, we're going to do great things in Arizona.
Great.
And that's what's so important to me.
Well, thank you, Frank. If somebody wanted to learn more about your campaign, where would they go?
They'd go to teamschmuck.com. And that's team, like the football team or baseball. Why? It's not Frank Schmuck, because this isn't about Frank. This is about the team, and the team comes before the Schmuck. It's so much more important, right? Because what does the word team mean? Together, everyone achieves more, and that's what we want to do.
Great, and that's Team Schmuck, SCHMUCK.com.
That's correct.
So early voting has already started. Make sure that you're getting out there and exercising that right to vote. We have locations here all over Chandler. Please make sure that you do that. And most importantly, if you don't have time to get out beforehand, November 8th is a deadline day. We're going to be airing both of these, both Frank and his opponent, so make sure that you weigh in and find out more about these candidates. Thanks for joining us.